Welcome, folks. I'm Jabby Kaway, joined by Achara Kirk.
What's up?
We're talking about Thor, Love and Thunder. This is a non-spoiler review. We just had a thoughts and feelings coming out of the theater video that we put out a couple days ago. This will go a little bit deeper without giving you any spoilers, nothing major that you couldn't have found out from the trailer or from IMDb. And later on, we'll have a live stream spoiler discussion. Now, you had mentioned off camera that some people were having questions because we talked about Christian Bale a lot.
Yes, I saw some comments where they were like, oh, does that mean that Chris Hemsworth sucked then because we didn't talk about him enough? Rest assured that wasn't the case, you guys.
So in that thoughts and feelings video that we put up before, I did talk about Chris Hemsworth quite briefly, but the thing is, the average watch time of that video was quite short. It was like 6 minutes and people watched like 2 minutes or something, so they missed my part. No one heard what I had to say. But I started off with saying I liked Chris Hemsworth a lot.
Yeah.
And Chris Hemsworth is probably my favorite actor from the MCU. Because like I think about everyone that's been involved so far, and he consistently makes me happy when I watch him. There's something about him where he just gets the mood every single time. He seems like he's having a good time. He's got the action hero vibe, and he has a lot of colors in his performances every single time.
This movie definitely is different for Thor. We learn more about his personality. It's a different type of journey for him, and I really, really enjoyed that.
Yeah, so just to be clear, my favorite superhero is Doctor Strange from the MCU.
Still Doctor Strange.
But my favorite actor has to be Chris Hemsworth, because there's something about him where he just gets it every single time, and it feels good. I think that for me, when I walked out of it, I was like, you know, I don't like this more than Thor Ragnarok. They're about even for me, and you're like, oh, I like this so much more than Thor Ragnarok.
Thor Ragnarok was a lot of fun, don't get me wrong. It was a lot of comedy, it was a lot of jokes, but in terms of story, I was kind of like, it's all right. Whereas this, perhaps because it was much more of an emotional journey for me, I connected with it more, and I enjoyed watching the characters go through that.
Talking about Christian Bale again, he was the one that pretty much stole the show in this movie, I feel like. He's such a strong villain, and when he shows up, he is a scene stealer.
Oh, yeah. Like, definitely when he's in the movie, you're like, whoa, Christian Bale is killing it as Gorr The God Butcher, you know. But I think that the entire cast was really, really good. I enjoyed Tessa Thompson as Valkyrie. I think I just personally, because I really like the character, and so I kind of wanted to see more of her, but every time she was on screen, I was just like, yeah, I love it. And then Natalie Portman, I thought was amazing. I mean, she's an incredible actress, but I guess in the other Thor movies, she hasn't really had as much of a storyline to kind of stretch her acting chops in that way, and she had an incredible story in this movie.
Watching some of the new Rockstars breakdowns of the trailer, I realized watching this movie that there was not a lot left in the way of surprises. Usually you get a sense as to where things are going in the first 20 minutes of a movie, and with this I'm like, I can see the next hour of how this is playing out, the next hour to 90 minutes.
But saying that, I think that because the cast is so strong and because there's such a connection with the characters, it's almost like, yeah, I might be able to see where this is going, but I enjoy being here.
It was fun, don't get me wrong. It's just that my fun level never reached a point where I was just like jumping out of my seat. It was like, this was like, oh, that was entertaining.
Yeah.
That's most of my feeling during this movie. I think that Taika Waititi, it seemed like he really had his way with this movie.
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely those Taika Waititi quirky comedy moments. I feel like that happened a lot more in the beginning and in the first half of the film. Like, I was laughing a lot. It almost felt like, in a way, it was like two different movies, at least tonally.
That's going to happen when you have Taika Waititi, though. It's his sensibilities combined with Marvel's sensibilities.
No, but also I think Taika is very good at emotional beats as well, but it's just combined with a comedy. At least for this movie, it felt like it was a lot more comedy heavy in the beginning, and then it kind of takes a turn and it's a lot more serious and dark. But I didn't mind that because I just enjoyed the story.
I had mostly smiles, and it was mostly feel good. To be fair, there was like 3 moments where I had strong laughs. But I guess because it's Taika Waititi, because of the commercials, because it's Thor, I was expecting more. Because like I got more laughs with Thor out of Avengers Endgame than I did here. I definitely got more laughs, I feel like, out of Ragnarok than I did here.
Yeah.
I guess that's what I'm saying, where it's like my feelings are pretty much even between the two films for different reasons. Between the two films' villains, I definitely prefer Christian Bale over, oh, help me out here. What's her name?
Jeff Goldblum? Oh, no.
Jeff Goldblum. No.
Sorry, no.
Kate Blanchett. Yeah. A moment ago, you were talking about how each time Chris Hemsworth does a Thor film, or just Thor in general, he tries to take a different approach to it. Still to this date, I'd say that Fat Thor from Endgame is my favorite. But I still appreciate the effort that Chris Hemsworth or the creators involved take to give Thor a different approach every single time, because he really does feel like an evolution over the course of the films. And that evolution doesn't necessarily mean just an upward trajectory. It's like he's going through his hills and valleys of becoming a different person, you know, aging, whatever, dealing with different circumstances, new people.
New desires, new goals.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that it's very interesting to watch him go through that process.
Yeah.
And Chris Hemsworth does a good job of finding a new space within the parameters of this character to keep him continually likable and fun to be around.
Yeah, because he's a god, right? So he's got all of that, like, you know, the powers and being a god and an immortal. But then he also manages to play the humanity of Thor really, really well and makes him so relatable.
I think that one of the biggest things when it comes to a Marvel film or comic book movies in general is the action and the visual effects. And I think that the visual effects for the most part was quite strong here.
Yeah.
There's not any moments I can think of where I was like, oh, that stands out to me as bad VFX. And I think that there was a combination of practical and visual effects here, if I'm not mistaken. It all made this world come to life in a way that was so cool to just, you know, play in, especially when we got to Zeus. That whole realm, like, it was very colorful and interesting, and it was just a nice playground of creativity and whatnot in terms of like character design and the types of people that were there. There wasn't a single boring second in that scene. In fact, one of my favorite laughs was in that scene. In terms of the action, I think that we got a hint of some cool stuff from Natalie Portman's character in the trailer, and I was like, oh, what the hell? Like, she has like this thing creatively in terms of like power moves and whatnot. I thought that was pretty cool, the way they just got with the superpowers of these characters, right?
Yeah.
They managed to find a way to give Natalie Portman a different kind of Thor than the original Thor.
And oh my God, I cannot believe that that's Natalie Portman's guns. Like, her arms, she's so yoked. Like, both her and Tessa Thompson, I was watching some videos, reading some articles on, like, you know, the fact that is not VFX. That's like literally they trained really, really hard for that.
Yep.
And gotta give props to the ladies.
Given all the rah-rah that Natalie Portman's been doing to get fit, I was actually expecting her to look bigger. I'm not gonna lie.
What? But she's a tiny lady though. Like, just normally.
I'm just being honest with you. Like, I looked at her, I'm like, that's about what I expect when you've done a lot of Pilates. Talking about the action still, in terms of like spectacle, there was definitely some cool stuff in there. But in terms of just fighting, in terms of just like pure action that has less to do with the spectacle of the visual effects, I wasn't quite as impressed with that. It felt like more could have been done in that area, because for me, they set the standard with Daredevil, right? And I know that's more grounded.
Yes.
But they set the standard with Daredevil episode 2 of season 1, where it's like, that is what Marvel's capable of. This is what we can do. And then you see Shang-Chi, the bus fight scene, you're like, okay, cool. Like, we can do this. Like, Marvel's capable of doing like some A-grade fight scene shit. And in here, we didn't get much of it, and I keep hoping to see that kind of thing integrated into the spectacle, the visual effects spectacle.
Well, I wonder as well if that is also more to do with the acting, the fighting style of the character, because Shang-Chi is a character that is an accomplished martial artist, so it makes sense for him to move and do fight scenes in that sort of way.
It doesn't have to be kung fu-y. It doesn't have to be like karate. Oh, okay, Squid Game. Right? Mm-hmm. Like the last episode of Squid Game, I'm not going to say what happens, but in the last episode of Squid Game, there's a fight scene, and it was really, really good. It's not karate, it's not taekwondo, it's not martial artsy, it's just a brawl.
Yeah,
and
it felt visceral.
It felt visceral, and I'm like, that's a really good fight scene. There's a movie called Street Kings with Keanu Reeves and Forrest Whitaker, and they have a fight at the end of the movie. Very quick, but I remember really enjoying it because it just felt brutal. I appreciate fight scenes like, or one of my favorite ones of all time is Eastern Promises, the naked fight scene.
Yeah.
You know, with Viggo Mortensen. It's like, that's just a raw fight. Obviously, we're talking about fight scenes that are more grounded.
R-rated as well. This is PG-13, I imagine.
Shang-Chi's PG-13.
Okay.
So all I'm driving at is that you can be more creative with these fight scenes and make it thrilling and make it feel like you're still part of it and whatnot, and keep the spectacle. I think there is a way to do it.
Sure.
It just felt like it favored spectacle and like, oh, okay, this is good enough, and then we're going to move on to the next thing, right? Okay. That's what it felt like for me in terms of action. It was fun. Don't get me wrong. It was all fun. We remarked about Chris Hemsworth's acting. Christian Bale, we've talked about to ad nauseum at this point. Natalie Portman, I know that you felt very strongly about her performance.
She has an incredible storyline in the movie. And you know, I thought that they did a good job of kind of giving equal attention to the main characters. It didn't feel like oh, I know this is Thor's movie, but it feels like, he's being sidetracked by these
sidelined, yeah.
Oh, yeah, sidelined by these characters or whatever. I felt like it was actually interwoven very well.
A lot better than we've seen in the past.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's all interconnected in a way. It gave Natalie Portman a really great opportunity to shine because, in
a way that we haven't seen her yet.
Yeah, at least in the Thor movies.
I did really enjoy her as Mighty Thor. I thought that she was definitely a standout performer in that way of fun to be around. Character-wise, and this is a Taika Waititi thing, character-wise, the film did really well.
Yeah.
Like, that's where he excels. She is very, very much the philosophy of what Taika Waititi always tries to do with his characters in his movies. That philosophy is simple. The characters just want to be cool.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. That's very true, yeah.
And she definitely fulfills that agenda.
Yeah, and that's all Thor is trying to be as well.
Right.
Like he's just trying to find his family and trying to be cool,
I think that his desires are well beyond the scope of just trying to be cool at this point. I think that there's so much more that he's looking for in this movie, and I really enjoyed that process as well.
There's definitely a deep sense of soul searching.
Yeah. I guess the last thing we can talk about is the music, and that's a character unto itself. It was in Ragnarok it got really established where he has his soundtrack, and it's this like 80s hard rock kind of sound.
Yeah.
And that's so much fun.
It almost feels like an homage to the 80s with the music, some of the visuals and everything. And it's just fun.
Yeah.
It's just pure joy.
And in between, there is the music score, which I don't feel like got enough presence in the movie.
I agree with you.
Because I only really heard it during the credits and I was like, oh, there's actually some really good score in this movie that I didn't even pay attention to at all. And I wish that it was given more attention, or like in terms of the sound balance.
Sure.
If I have a complaint about the music, that's it. For some reason, when I came out of this movie at the end, I wasn't coming out going, I effing love this movie. It's like, that wasn't my feeling. My feeling was like, I was entertained. But like I said, overall, the journey was fun. It might edge out Ragnarok by a millimeter for me, just because like consistently you had good story here.
Yeah.
It moved really well. It stacked really well. I thought that the stakes were high and you got more of a sense of vulnerability with our characters across the board.
Yeah.
And so they did things here that you don't see very often in other Marvel films. So I'm like, okay, cool. Like overall, good film, entertaining. It edges out Ragnarok a little bit.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the main reason for me why I enjoy this more than Ragnarok is just story. It came together really well.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like, oh my God, that was the funniest Thor movie I've ever seen. It was like, there were jokes in this movie. It was really funny. It was also incredibly moving. I cried at a few points, which I was surprised by. Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was entertaining. I had a lot of fun and I can't wait to see it again.
You guys, thanks so much for hanging out. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Do subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that bell icon, all notifications to look this up. I'm Jabby Quay. This is
Achara Kirk.
Peace out.